Across the world, there are rising concerns of a potential coronavirus pandemic after a major jump in cases outside of China.
China remains the epicenter, with millions forcibly confined to their home. Yet the virus still spreads. 30 countries and territories, nearly 80,000 cases. The World Health Organization unsure how far it will go. The coronavirus is looking more and more like a global pandemic, spreading far beyond mainland China. In Italy, a few cases this weekend ballooned today to over 200. At least 7 dead. In Iran, 12 dead so far. The government is racing to increase production of surgical masks. In South Korea, more than 800 now infected. In the most impacted area, a line for face masks went on and on.
Problem is, with this new virus, it comes with a mortality of around 2 to 3%, which is extremely high.
The virus now nearing pandemic proportions, as doctors believe many countries, especially those bordering China, probably have more cases than they know about or are reporting.
The Dow down more than 1,000 points.
Evening, Americans are being told today it's just a matter of time before the coronavirus begins spreading in this country.
A matter of time before it begins rolling across the U.S. with the potential to become a pandemic. So far, health experts say the risk in the U.S. is low, only 57 known cases. The concern, with a 2% mortality rate at the epicenter in China, the coronavirus is far deadlier than the seasonal flu. Despite the CDC's warnings, President Trump in India today downplayed the risk.
You may ask about the coronavirus, which is very well under control in our country.
Meanwhile, the Trump team insists the economic fallout should be minimal.
We have contained this, I won't say airtight, but pretty close to airtight.
Down 1,900 points and 6% in just 2 days. A lot of focus on how quickly a vaccine could be developed. The NIH says human trials for a vaccine could start within 2 months, but a widely available vaccine, that will probably be another 12 to 18 months away. Lester?
Amazing how quickly this is all unfolded before our eyes.
South Korea has the highest known contaminations outside China, around 1,000 cases. Iran is of particular concern. The deputy health minister among the 100 reported infections, but medical officials worry the real number may be higher. In Europe, Italy is the hardest hit, at least 10 deaths. The virus has now spread to the south of Italy as well.
It's not necessarily that more people are getting sick overnight. It's that authorities are testing more people.
John, we've been hearing low risk in this country. Suddenly this warning. What do we know about the timing of it?
Well, Lester, the CDC is hoping the coronavirus turns into a seasonal type virus that goes away when warm weather hits, much like the flu does. But officials there are preparing in case it becomes a year-round issue. And with more infections showing up around the globe, they say it's not a matter of if, but when we'll get more outbreaks here in the U.S.
We're very, very ready for this, for anything, whether it's going to be a breakout of larger proportions or whether or not we're at that very low level, and we want to keep it that way.
Meanwhile, the number of coronavirus cases worldwide has reached nearly 81,000, with roughly 3,000 deaths.
Numbers from the CDC, 60 known coronavirus cases in the U.S., though that number is expected to grow.
The risk right now is very low to Americans. From a public health perspective, we technically are in a state of containment in the United States.
The FDA says there is no shortage of masks, of gowns, of gloves right now. It has 30 million stockpiled, but if there were a true pandemic, it might need 10 times that many.
Why is it spreading so quickly?
So it seems that it's extremely contagious.
Do you think it's going to keep spreading?
I think that it is heading towards becoming a pandemic, yes.
The Dow average losing nearly 1,200 points today, down 11% so far this week.
Here at the UC Davis Medical Center, perhaps the first U.S. case of community spread of the virus. It means doctors don't know how or where the unidentified woman got sick, since she had no travel to China or known exposure to someone with the virus.
This is probably the tip of the iceberg.
With 60 confirmed cases of coronavirus, virus in the U.S. Doctors at UC Davis say their patient was transferred here February 19th with a suspected viral infection.
A dramatic drop, nearly 1,200 points, the most ever in a single day for the Dow, in coronavirus crash mode, on pace for its worst week since 2008.
But the virus, we're doing a very professional job. The risk to the American people remains very low.
The degree of risk has the potential to change quickly.
We do expect more cases.
It may get a little bigger, may not get bigger at all. We'll see what happens.
Tonight, coronavirus is on every continent but Antarctica and surging in South Korea. More than 500 new cases reported today and nearly 10,000 in quarantine. In Iran, 26 have now died from the virus, and a cabinet minister who was seen sitting a few seats away from Iran's President Rouhani just yesterday has tested positive. Tonight, the virus has spread from China to 47 countries. Asia, the Middle East, Europe, North and South America, all affected.
And a new twist tonight. In Hong Kong, a patient's pet dog has tested positive and is in quarantine.
The World Health Organization tonight has raised its risk assessment of coronavirus to very high. The Dow losing another 357 points in a week-long market meltdown.
Plummeting 12% in just 5 days. The president reacting late today.
Well, I think it's just people don't know. It's the unknown. I think they're not very happy with the Democrat candidates when they see them. I think that has an impact.
The Trump administration has shown towering and dangerous incompetence when it comes to the coronavirus.
He shouldn't be making statements like that because it's so bad for the country. And Nancy Pelosi, I mean, she should go back to her district and clean it up.
The president's acting chief of staff blasting the media, which for weeks has covered a deadly virus that's now infected more than 80,000 people in more than 50 countries.
The reason you're saying so much attention to it today is that they think this is going to be what brings down the president.
Health systems around the world are not ready and need to be better prepared to absorb the impact.
The European outbreak concentrated in Italy, where 4 more people have died and cases spiking again, now at 821. In Iran, they canceled Friday prayers, disinfecting instead. In Jerusalem, Catholic priests being told to give communion by hand only.
And tonight, Germany, which now has the second most cases in Europe at more than 60, is considering canceling all major international events and conferences.
As 60% of pharmacies report being sold out of face masks.
Current recommendation is if you are sick, particularly if you think that you may have a severe respiratory viral infection, wearing a mask can help prevent spreading that virus to other people.
But if you don't want to get it from the guy in the airport next to you, is it worthwhile?
It doesn't seem to be.
The government is prepared for a potential coronavirus outbreak. It comes after the first death was reported in this country this weekend.
Sure. The nation's top infectious disease official telling NBC News today the virus has reached outbreak proportions.
Across the country, over 100 confirmed cases in more than a dozen states.
This is New York. We're a gateway to the world. You see all these cases around the world, around the country. Of course, we're going to have it here.
In Italy, a hot spot. 18 more deaths today. The world's busiest museum, the Louvre in Paris, is closed indefinitely. But in China, where the crisis began, a bright spot, with numbers falling fast.
A warning that a pandemic is likely. It comes from one of the government's top health officials who has spent much of his career on the front lines of outbreaks.
We're dealing with clearly an emerging infectious disease that has now reached outbreak proportions and likely pandemic proportions. How lethal is it? So right now, if you look at the people who just come to the attention of the health authorities, that's 2 to 2.5%. But even if it goes down to 1%, that's still very, very serious. So if it went from 2% to 1%, you were still 10 times more lethal than the standard influenza that we get on a seasonal basis. There are people who are shrugging this off, saying, it's just like the flu.
It's not, because it's brand new. When you have a brand new virus in which no one has had any experience before, that gives the virus kind of an open roadway to spread.
While the president is again accusing Democrats of fear-mongering. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says it's President Trump spending more time playing the blame game.
The president is downplaying. He is downplaying the threat of the coronavirus to a dangerous degree.
Across the country, sporadic reports tonight of store shelves emptied out as Americans stock up to hunker down. From bottled water to toilet paper to disinfecting wipes.
Italy, where a growing outbreak has killed more than 100. The 11th fatality announced today, the first in California. There are now more than 150 cases in a growing number of states.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes. The reason behind that 6 feet of distance.
Where these people are flying, it's safe to fly, and large portions of the world are very safe to fly.
With 4 new states, Tennessee, Nevada, Colorado, and Maryland, reporting their first positive test results today, there are now more than 220 cases across the country.
As the number of cases grows, there's a new warning tonight. The U.S. does not have enough coronavirus test kits to meet the current demand.
Don't have enough tests today to meet what we anticipate will be the demand going forward.
Coronavirus uncertainty sending the Dow plunging nearly 1,000 points.
Well, I think the 3.4% is really a false number.
The reality? It's not a false number, but the actual estimate released by the World Health Organization, although it could still change as more data comes in.
A lot of people don't report because they get the coronavirus and they get better relatively quickly. Not that severe. Some of them go to work, but they get better.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi today.
When the president said go to work, no, there are other guidances that should be out there.
If you get sick, stay home.
President Trump tweeting today he never said people that are feeling sick should go to work, calling it disinformation put out by the Democrats. On some of the stats, he says he's going with his gut.
Now, this is just my hunch.
The reality is his own experts say in the midst of a public health crisis, facts matter.
We make policy recommendations and analysis of what we're going to recommend based on accumulation of data. Data is very important.
The vast majority of Americans can go about their daily lives, but just remember to keep washing your hands.
$220 for a box of 10 masks on Amazon, 11 times the regular price. And for a bottle of hand sanitizer on Walmart.com, $48, normally less than $4.
With hand sanitizer selling out, you may have come across recipes for making it yourself with vodka. But major brands like Tito's are warning their products do not work. There's not enough alcohol in it to meet the CDC standard for hand sanitizing.
Nationwide, 6 new states, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Kentucky, Oklahoma, and Connecticut, reported their first cases today.
Stocks tumbling yet again today with the Dow losing another 256 points.
Anybody that needs a test gets a test. They're there. They have the tests. And the tests are beautiful. And the tests are all perfect. Like the letter was perfect. The transcription was perfect.
That, apparently an incongruous reference to the Ukraine call at the center of his impeachment, coming even as state and local officials have criticized the administration for a sluggish ramp-up to get coronavirus tests to those who need them. That's after initial problems with some of the tests. The vice president late tonight announcing the U.S. has sent out 900,000 tests this week, with 200,000 more set to be shipped tomorrow, short of the 1.5 million he initially. An investigation by The Atlantic found only about 1,900 people have been tested for the virus in the U.S., even the government's own top doctors critical.
I'm not happy about the lack of the appropriate number of test kits, that's for sure.
With more than 100,000 cases now reported worldwide.
Are we going to have to start quarantining people around the world and telling people to stay in your homes?
I think in the initial phase is yes. For this kind of problem, the world's got to work together or otherwise we're toast.
I haven't touched my face in weeks. In weeks.
Mr. President,
I miss it.
This photo taken 2 days before.
There are now over 400 positive cases.
Anybody that needs a test gets a test.
But at a White House briefing today, Secretary Alex Azar forced to clarify the president's remarks, calling it shorthand, adding that what he meant to say is that you need a doctor's order for a test.
Italy has seen nothing like this. Hospitals overwhelmed, deaths rising fast.
With hundreds of new infections and dozens of new deaths every day, Italy has now replaced China as the epicenter health experts are most worried about.
Across the world, there are now more than 105,000 cases of the virus in at least 95 countries, with more than 3,500 deaths.
We know of fewer than 24 deaths from coronavirus in the U.S. By comparison, between 12 and 60,000 Americans die of the flu in an average year.
According to a recent study, in a normal day, we touch our face more than 20 times an hour.
Here in the U.S., at least 33 states and the District of Columbia have confirmed over 500 cases and more than 20 deaths. 100 countries are now reporting cases, and Italy, one of the hardest hit, has placed millions on lockdown.
133 new deaths in just one day, 366 now in all. And today, more than 1,400 new infections.
Clearly, I'm concerned about community spread. You have to realistically be concerned about community spread.
President Trump taking to Twitter that he has a perfectly coordinated and fine-tuned plan for our attack on coronavirus. And last night, the president saying he was not worried about the virus coming to the White House.
No, I'm not concerned at all. No, I'm not. No, we've done a great job with this.
But blasting the New York Times as an embarrassment to journalism after it published a story that described internal White House debates on how to confront the virus.
We have a president who tells us that he is a great genius. He knows everything about the coronavirus. Our administration will believe in science.
Offered its worst day in 12 years, the Dow losing over 2,000 points.
While the number of sick in a growing tally of states across the country is soaring, doctors expect a spike in coronavirus cases as more people get tested.
Financial markets tumble and the number of U.S. cases of coronavirus climbs, President Trump tonight continuing to downplay the outbreak as the coronavirus crisis hits close to home on Capitol Hill. At least 4 Republican lawmakers, Ted Cruz, Matt Gaetz, Paul Gosar, and Doug Collins, now choosing to self-quarantine after unknowingly interacting with an infected person at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Maryland last month. Collins seen shaking hands with President Trump on Friday. Gaetz seen traveling with the president today.
I have not been tested for the coronavirus.
Has the president been tested?
Let me be sure and get you an answer to that. I honestly don't know the answer to the question.
I don't think we've seen the worst yet. I think we'll still continue to see more infections.
One source tells NBC News the president thinks his approach is good politics, even though he's been advised to let the experts do the talking.
Italian government tonight put the entire country on lockdown. All Italy now a zona rossa, a red zone. Before, the restrictions only applied to northern and central Italy.
Now that the virus has a foothold in so many countries, the threat of a pandemic has become very real.
Several virologists I've spoken to say we actually have no idea how many coronavirus infections there are because few countries have done widespread testing.
1 million residents in long-term care facilities contract serious infections every year. Of those patients, 380,000 die, and that's before coronavirus.
But a new study finds that for those who are infected, roughly half will develop symptoms in about 5 days. And by 12 days, just about everyone infected will have symptoms. That's why anyone under quarantine needs to take that 14-day time period seriously.
This is literally a matter of life and death.
With the number of confirmed cases and deaths nationwide climbing, more states are declaring emergencies.
We're doing a great job with it, and it will go away. Just stay calm.
Tonight, the famous Sweet Life in Italy now facing perhaps its toughest test, with coronavirus deaths jumping to 631, now over 10,000 testing positive nationwide.
Flu and coronavirus are respiratory illnesses. They have similar symptoms and they can both be deadly, but the big difference here is that we know the flu. We have a vaccine for it and medications that work well, and we know that the flu is seasonal. It'll start to wind down come summer. But when it comes to the coronavirus, it's still mostly a mystery. We don't have any treatments. It appears to be more deadly than the flu, especially in the elderly, and it continues to spread faster than we expected.
Tonight, we're less than 36 hours away from a government ban taking effect on travel from Europe to the United States. Americans overseas scrambling to get home, while more people inside the U.S. are hunkering down.
To keep new cases from entering our shores, we will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days.
Today, the Dow dropping about 10%, the worst drop since the Black Monday crash of 1987.
I have a lot of emergency actions that I can take.
The president has been under pressure to do more, including from some Republicans who say his administration did not move quickly enough to address the crisis. Today, the Democratic presidential candidates pouncing.
Public fears are being compounded by pervasive lack of trust in this president.
The coronavirus
virus is on a scale of a major war. It is clear to me, at least, that we have an administration that is largely incompetent.
Also tonight, a Brazilian official who met with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago last weekend has now tested positive for the virus. The White House saying the president had, quote, almost no interactions with the individual and does not require being tested at this time.
It is a failing. I mean, let's admit it.
Today, one of the nation's top health officials described the system bluntly.
The idea of anybody getting it easily, the way people in other countries are doing it, we're not set up for that. Do I think we should be? Yes. But we're not.
Frankly, the testing has been going very smooth.
South Korea, for example, says it's testing 10,000 patients a day for COVID-19. The U.S. is nowhere near that number.
Why not?
Well, from early on in this effort, we've been addressing the testing issue.
As private labs and hospitals asked mid-January about developing their own tests, but the federal government didn't issue new rules speeding up the approval process until late February. The Cleveland Clinic says it's one out of only about a dozen hospitals across the country that are doing on-site testing.
In Italy, the death toll rising over 1,000.
Every shop and business in this country shut down, including iconic Italian brands like Gucci. Only grocery stores and pharmacies are allowed to stay open.
And how long the peak outbreak might last in the States, experts tell us weeks or maybe months.
New York State now has more than 400 confirmed cases.
I am officially declaring a national emergency. Two very big words. The action I am taking will open up access to up to $50 billion.
The president saying he will also urge states to set up emergency operation centers, call on hospitals to enact emergency preparedness plans, partner with private companies to increase testing abilities, and set up drive-through test sites.
The goal is for individuals to be able to drive up and be swabbed without having to leave your car.
You take responsibility for that, and when can you guarantee that every single American who needs a test will be able to have a test?
No, I don't take responsibility at all, because we were given a set of circumstances, and we were given rules, regulations, and specifications from a different time. Wasn't meant for this kind of an event with the kind of numbers that we're talking about. This will start very quickly, and we'll have the ability to do in the millions over a very, very quick period of time.
The event was not without mixed messaging. The president shook hands with a few of the business leaders, despite CDC guidance to avoid that. And at times, he seemed to downplay the urgency.
5 million within a month, I doubt we'll need anywhere near that.
And just last week, Mr. Trump was pictured standing next to a Brazilian official who was visiting Mar-a-Lago, who later tested positive for coronavirus.
Are you being selfish by not getting tested?
Well, I didn't say I wasn't going to be tested.
Are you going to be?
Most likely, yeah. Most
when
likely.
Do you think
not for that
happen?
reason, but because I think I will do it anyway.
Will you let us
fairly
know the
soon?
results?
We're working on that. We're working out a schedule.
What do we do if we have a limited number of ventilators and more patients than ventilators available? What do we do if we have more patients than beds available?
Nationwide, the U.S. has just 46,000 ICU beds, but a report suggests at least 200,000 people could need ICU care, perhaps many more. Hospitals have 160,000 respirators on hand, but a pandemic like 1918 could require more than 742,000. Already, hospitals are reporting shortages of masks and protective clothing.
Over 3/4 of the states have already declared a state of emergency, and New York City joined them yesterday.
The pictures tell the story: empty shelves and long lines as concerns about the coronavirus play out at the nation's grocery stores.
Target, Walmart, and Costco imposing similar limits. And starting Sunday, some retailers opening up their parking lots for drive-through coronavirus testing. Orders for hand sanitizer, masks, and gloves skyrocketed 817% last month online.
It is scary, but we can't stop believing in God. We can't
give up hope. There's always hope.
For Christians, the debate over whether to close churches comes at a difficult time during Lent, with Easter just weeks away.
President Trump says while he is not showing any symptoms, he's been tested for the virus and is now awaiting the results.
Confirmed cases in every state except West Virginia, and the first death in New York City. Nationwide, over 50 dead so far.
I had my temperature taken coming into the room. I also took the test last night. Yeah.
Surprising, because just before midnight, the White House physician released a statement that a coronavirus test for President Trump was not currently indicated. When will we have the result, Mr. President?
I don't know, whatever it takes, a day or 2 days, whatever.
The conflict unexplained. New today, temperature checks for media and staff by the White House Medical Office. One journalist was denied entry. Also new today, the president on setting an example.
Mr. President, respectfully, you've been sending mixed messages. We watched as you shook hands with people yesterday. Why are you shaking hands, sir?
Because it almost becomes a habit, and you get out of that habit.
Is it a mixed message, sir?
Just take it nice and easy, okay? Just relax. People come up to me. They shake hands. They put their hand out. It's sort of a natural reflex. Shaking hands is not a great thing to be doing right now, I agree. But people put their hand out. Sometimes I'll put the hand out. You don't think about it. People are thinking about it more and more. We have to think about it. It's important.
Many people who are suffering from symptoms say they still cannot get a test.
Lines are growing. At this drive-through location in Colorado, cars stretch down the road. The demand so high, officials closed early.
The more tests we take, the more that number will go up. Nobody believes there's only 500 cases of coronavirus in New York today. We believe there are thousands of people who have coronavirus.
Spanish officials saying the number of confirmed cases spiking to 5,700, while in Italy, new cases jumped 20% to more than 21,000.
At any given normal time, hospitals are almost at full capacity, and the doctors and nurses are mostly working at the maximum level they can work. There are currently around 45,000 ICU beds in this country, but you have to remember those beds are currently occupied by patients already using them, so coronavirus patients, that's going to add even more to the burden. The number of ventilators we have, right around 160,000. By some estimates, even a moderate epidemic can cause 200,000 cases.
When we're talking about flattening the curve, we're talking about the mathematical projections of how many people this virus will infect over time.
The only way we can flatten the curve right now is by getting absolutely everyone on the same page with regards to the safety and precautionary measures. Without testing, to be honest, we're flying blind. It's impossible to say until we actually get the test out and running, but it's obviously put us far behind where we need to be.
Ohio and Illinois shutting down restaurants and bars today. California closing bars and wineries.
As the number of coronavirus cases soars above 3,000.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio closing all New York City public schools.
We are using the full power of the federal government to defeat the coronavirus, and we will do whatever it takes, and we're doing, I think, really, really well.
The worst is, yes, ahead for us. It is how we respond to that challenge that's going to determine what the ultimate endpoint is going to be.
There's no need for anybody in the country to hoard essential food supplies. They said to me, could you please tell them, just go and buy, enjoy it, have a nice dinner, relax.
It's going to be a wave, and it is going to be a wave that at any of these projections will overwhelm the healthcare system.
A stark contrast to China, where entire hospitals to treat COVID-19 were built in less than 2 weeks. Here in the U.S., doctors and nurses contracting COVID-19. In Washington and New Jersey, 2 ER doctors in critical condition.
If someone contracted the virus, was quarantined, and it went its course and they recovered, are they going to get it again, or are they now immune?
They're now immune. They're not going to get it again, at least for the foreseeable future, because once you get it, your immune system is primed to fight it again. And we think at least a year, if not more, possibly a lifetime of protection.
Spain, just the latest country to impose a lockdown that now covers more than 100 million Europeans, with 2,000 new coronavirus cases in the last 24 hours. At least 5,400 cases and 120 deaths. In Italy, the worst afflicted country after China, deaths surged by 368 in the past day to more than 1,800 and nearly 25,000 cases. A viral video shows a man flipping through seemingly endless obituary pages.
At least 20 statewide school closures have already been issued, impacting around 27 million students.
Elbow bump.
It's a shelter-in-place order. 7 million people told to stay at home and away from others for the next 3 weeks. It comes as the federal government called on all of us to limit gatherings to 10 people.
No matter who you are, please stay home.
Glad to see that you're practicing social distancing. That looks very nice.
The president's comments, his most direct appeal yet for Americans to take the virus seriously.
I want federal guidance. This is a national pandemic, and there are no national rules.
Are you considering instituting a nationwide lockdown, a nationwide quarantine?
At this point, not nationwide, but well, there are some places in our nation that are not very affected at all. But we may look at certain areas, certain hotspots, as they call them. We'll be looking at that. But at this moment, no, we're not.
From Connecticut to Colorado, Ohio to Alabama, roughly a dozen states are now offering drive-through COVID-19 testing. Some people confused by special requirements for testing, like an appointment or a doctor's note. Mass General Emergency Physician Clayton Dalton says the delays will almost certainly have dire consequences.
I do think that these early failures will result in more people getting sick and more people dying than might otherwise have happened.
Dow losing almost 3,000 points, even after the Fed cut interest rates to near zero. America's schools are also grinding to a halt. Nearly every state has closed some or all of their schools, impacting some 30 million children. The mayor of New York City today telling residents to prepare to shelter in place.
This is an extraordinary time in this nation's history. It will go down in the history books as one of those moments of true crisis.
New York State has the most cases of coronavirus, while across the country in Washington State, the death toll is the highest.
The federal government says public and private labs have now processed roughly 59,000 tests so far.
Trump administration and Congress are working on a massive stimulus package.
Americans need cash now, and the president wants to get cash now. And I mean now, in the next 2 weeks.
Tonight, the White House is proposing what would be one of the largest emergency aid packages ever, in the range of $1 trillion.
This is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic.
Italy in the eye of the storm, with too few hospital beds and more than 2,000 dead, suggesting without any action, 2.2 million Americans could die.
In total, American hospitals have approximately 160,000 ventilators. In a worst-case scenario, the U.S. need could be massive, up to 960,000 ventilators.
If I get corona, I get corona. At the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying.
Now reaching every state, infecting thousands and killing more than 100 nationwide.
Alarming spring break images from Texas to Clearwater Beach, Florida. Today, as packed as ever, college students say they see the warnings, including to stay out of crowds, but
if I get corona, I get corona. At the end of the day, I'm not going to let it stop me from partying.
I mean, I'm worried for the older people, but not for me.
I view it as in a sense, a wartime president. I mean, that's what we're fighting. I mean, it's a very tough situation. It's the invisible enemy. That's always the toughest enemy, the invisible enemy, but we're going to defeat the invisible enemy.
We're non-symptomatic professional athletes getting tests while others are waiting in line and can't get them. Do the well-connected go to the front of the line?
Well, you'd have to ask them that question. I mean, I've read. No, I wouldn't say so, but perhaps that's been the story of life.
In Italy tonight, infections are spiking. The country under lockdown for the past week saw its death toll rise by 475 today, the biggest one-day jump.
I'm dealing with a global crisis. Right now, I'm trying to do my best to make sure that we don't have an economic meltdown and that people don't die. Is that enough for you to keep me busy for tonight?
A new study in China looked at 2,000 children who were infected with the virus and found half had mild symptoms, about 40% had moderate symptoms, and about 6% developed severe illness.
Over 3,600 here in New York City alone. And as each day passes, some of the things we thought we knew about this virus have changed, like the risk to younger patients.
Number of coronavirus cases nationwide is hitting yet another milestone, climbing to over 13,000. Cases in neighboring New York are skyrocketing.
Nobody can tell you when this is going to end. Nobody can say 2 months, 4 months, 9 months. Nobody.
Governors are supposed to be doing a lot of this work. Federal government's not supposed to be out there buying vast amounts of items and then shipping. You know, we're not a shipping clerk.
The Labor Department says last week it had 281,000 claims for unemployment insurance, a 1/3 increase from the week before.
But the cost was freedom. The one-party state locked down tens of millions. Disobedience wasn't an option.
Among the known scams, fake websites offering to sell medical supplies now in high demand like surgical masks, phony charities seeking donations, offers to invest in companies claiming they can detect or cure the virus, and even calls or emails pretending to be from doctors who claim to be treating a relative and demanding payment.
Just don't know that you can commit a more ruthless and evil act right now.
For 75 million people in New York, California, Illinois, and Connecticut ordered to stay at home. The U.S. borders to Mexico and Canada set to close to non-essential travel.
And when I talk about the most drastic action we can take, this is the most drastic action we can take.
As the number of confirmed cases skyrockets in New York.
Based on data collected from state health departments, NBC News calculates more than 117,000 COVID-19 tests have now been completed.
The Dow tumbling more than 900 points to end Wall Street's worst week since 2008.
In South Carolina, unemployment claims this week have shot up at least 400%. Colorado, 875%. Oregon, more than 2,100% in just 2 days. Meaning of jammed phone lines and crashing unemployment websites.
Lawmakers tonight are still hashing out an expected $1 trillion economic relief package with those direct payments up to $1,200 possibly for many Americans, $500 per child.
There's tremendous spirit to get something done, so we'll see what happens.
Is it possible that your impulse to put a positive spin on things may be giving Americans a false sense of hope?
No, I don't think so.
Misrepresenting the preparedness right now.
No, I don't think so. I think that I think it's got
the not yet approved drug.
Such a lovely question. Look, it may work and it may not work. I feel good about it. That's all it is, just a feeling. I'm a smart guy. I feel good about it.
What do you say to Americans who are watching you right now who are scared?
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say. Go ahead. I think it's a very nasty question, and I think it's a very bad signal that you're putting out to the American people. The American people are looking for answers, and they're looking for hope. And you're doing sensationalism.
The White House announced that a member of the vice president's staff has tested positive for coronavirus. The White House tonight says neither President Trump nor Vice President Pence had close contact with that individual.
At least 627 new fatalities in just 24 hours, a one-day record. In the hardest hit north, emergency rooms are at, or some doctors say past, the breaking point. Sky News gained rare access to an intensive care unit in the city of Bergamo. 50 to 60 new COVID-19 cases here each day.
Even urgent surgeries like organ transplants are being performed on a case-by-case basis.
Nationwide, 45 states have shut down schools entirely. More than 52 million students now forced to learn from home.
A stark warning from public health officials in New York. Immediately stop testing non-hospitalized patients for COVID-19.
We are literally scouring the globe looking for medical supplies.
Nationwide, more than 20,000 confirmed cases.
Tonight, new images of Italy in crisis. The number of dead surging by 793, a total of 4,825 dead, making this the deadliest day so far anywhere in the world. Corpses wait here for cremation. The morgues are overflowing. 53,578 total cases.
These are the newest images we have of COVID-19, mapped out in a secure government lab where researchers are urgently trying to understand the virus that's ravaging the world. Is that those sharp objects sticking out of this microscopic protein essentially stab patients' lungs.
Revelations that Rand Paul, the Republican from Kentucky, tested positive, sparking concerns about whether the Senate will be able to finish the job. All of it as the death toll in the U.S. tops 394.
So apparently the only way to get the President of the United States to pay attention is to go on national television and make noise about it, which I won't stop doing until we get what we need.
Late this afternoon, the president responded.
The federal government has deployed hundreds of tons of supplies from our national stockpile to locations with the greatest need.
As cases in New York surged to more than 15,000.
I was in these parks. You would not know that anything was going on. It's arrogant. It's self-destructive. It's disrespectful to other people, and it has to stop, and it has to stop now. This is not a joke, and I am not kidding.
Democrats are pushing for their priorities.
Workers first, not helping and bailing out big corporations, focusing on the workers.
Italy tightening its unprecedented lockdown even more, a day after a record-breaking nearly 800 died. Germany now reporting 55 deaths, nearly 19,000 cases, as Spain's number surging even more. 394 deaths in one day.
More than 150 million Americans are joining the more than 1.5 billion people globally told to stay inside.
NBC News has confirmed for the first time in a 24-hour period, more than 100 Americans died from symptoms connected to the coronavirus. The death toll in the U.S. has now soared over 500.
But this is not the way to do it. This is ad hoc. I'm competing with other states. I'm bidding up other states on the prices.
But nationwide, unemployment claims are expected to soar this week into the millions. In just one day last week, New Jersey says a record 15,000 claims crashed the state's online system.
Republicans accusing them of trying to squeeze in items that are unrelated to the crisis.
They're filibustering hospital funding and more masks because they want to argue with the airlines over their carbon footprint?
The country is burning, and your side wants to play political games.
Democrats complaining the bill does too little for workers and too much for corporations.
Bill still includes something that most Americans don't want to see. Large corporate bailouts with almost no strings attached.
America will again and soon be open for business, very soon, a lot sooner than 3 or 4 months. We cannot let the cure be worse than the problem itself.
So the evidence is coming together, suggesting that the virus can change and that there are different lineages that have different disease or more serious disease causing effect.
COVID cases are exploding, doubling every few days in some communities in this country. Now with calls at the state level growing louder and more insistent for Americans to isolate, President Trump, focused on boosting the economy, is talking about ways to get back to business soon, putting him on a potential collision course with public health experts who say this is no time to lower our guard.
In New York, the number of confirmed cases statewide is doubling every 3 days.
We're not slowing it, and it is accelerating on its own. We're now looking at a bullet train because the numbers are going up that quickly.
I would love to have the country opened up and just raring to go by Easter.
The Olympic Games has now officially been postponed in Tokyo.
Experts continue to warn hospitals could eventually need hundreds of thousands of additional ventilators. A frustrated New York governor lashed out at the White House.
Where are the ventilators? Where are the gowns? Where's the PPEs? Where are the masks? Where are they?
Easter's a very special day for me. And I see it's sort of in that timeline that I'm thinking about. I think Easter Sunday, and you'll have packed churches all over our country. I think it would be a beautiful time.
But that proposed timeline goes against what his top health advisor told NBC News just days ago about how long the pandemic will last.
I cannot see that all of a sudden next week or 2 weeks from now it's going to be over. I don't think there's a chance of that.
You're going to lose more people by putting a country into a massive recession or depression. You're going to lose people. You're going to have suicides by the thousands.
The bill's expected to greenlight checks to most Americans, about $1,200 per person, $3,400 for a family of 4, and 4 months' salary for workers who are furloughed.
Jobless claims are surging, crashing some state unemployment websites, with the unemployment rate expected to hit 9% by the end of the year.
China is finally reopening. Visitors returning to the Great Wall. The Beijing Zoo open too. Even Wuhan, the city where the coronavirus broke out, is slowly returning to normal life after 2 months on lockdown. In Italy, the death toll spiked again today, around 700, near record levels.
Turns out the couple ingested chloroquine phosphate, which is actually used as a parasite treatment for fish. She said she'd heard about it from President Trump.
We saw his press conference. It was on a lot, actually.
And then did you seek out chloroquine?
I had it in the house because I used to have koi fish.
But in fact, the president has touted another type of chloroquine in tablet form. It's a malaria drug that researchers are testing as a possible coronavirus treatment, though there have been no clinical trials proving it works.
There's a real chance that it could have a tremendous impact.
Another similar drug, hydroxychloroquine, has also been used to treat lupus and rheumatoid arthritis for decades. But now surging demand is causing shortages for lupus patients.
Breaking news tonight, the deadliest day yet of the coronavirus outbreak in the U.S. Over 200 dead in 24 hours. U.S. cases surging to over 60,000.
We still have the trajectory going up, 80% still self-resolved. About 15% of the people who test positive require hospitalization.
While Italy has the highest death toll, over 6,800, Spain has now surpassed China, 700 dead overnight. And just today, word that 71-year-old Prince Charles tested positive for the virus, but has not been hospitalized.
Also in the deal, $500 billion for corporations like airlines, including new rules on oversight and a ban on stock buybacks. And more than $100 billion for hospitals. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo saying his state that's been hardest hit will get $3 billion, what he says is not nearly enough.
That is a drop in the bucket as to need.
In Louisiana, a pastor has continued services despite a state order banning gatherings over 50.
I'm the healed and the devil's trying to give me the flu.
As a Texas evangelical preaches,
Put your hand on that television set.
That's just not faith. That's presumption. God is not a genie.
Convalescent plasma, and it's been used in past pandemics. The idea is when a patient recovers from coronavirus, their blood has antibodies that can be used on a patient that's currently infected. This is not FDA approved, but they are allowing doctors to use it on a case-by-case basis, but only for the sickest patients. It's not a cure, but it's a therapy that can be used in the interim while we wait for medicines to be approved in the next 3 to 4 months, and a vaccine hopefully in a year.
Breaking news tonight, the grim milestone, the U.S. overtaking China for the most coronavirus cases in the world. The death toll in the U.S. now topping 1,000.
Speaking to the New York Times, Dr. Colleen Smith calls Elmhurst Hospital in Queens, New York, apocalyptic. It saw 13 deaths in 24 hours.
We had to get a refrigerated truck to store the bodies of patients who are dying.
In New York State, the number of coronavirus cases is skyrocketing, now more than 37,000, a triple-digit spike in deaths in just one day.
Across Louisiana, the numbers paint a stunning picture. In just the last 24 hours, an alarming 28% increase in the number of new coronavirus cases, now totaling more than 2,300 since the outbreak began. And 83 deaths, including a 17-year-old from New Orleans.
The U.S. death toll has now reached a grim milestone as the number of infected soars to extraordinary levels.
Going from 50-year low unemployment to a now record 3.2 million Americans seeking unemployment benefits. Wall Street rallied for a third day on the rescue package news. The Dow up 1,300 points, more than 6%.
In New York City alone, there are more than 300 members of the police force with COVID-19. Hundreds more are waiting on tests, and thousands have called in sick.
And for many in Italy, it's more than just fear. Nearly 700 more deaths today. The total number of infected is about as high as China reported at its peak.
Tonight, a dramatic spike in New York State's death toll from 385 to more than 500. Today, via Twitter, President Trump lashed out at automakers, demanding they begin making ventilators fast. This despite last night casting doubt on the number being requested by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo.
I don't believe you need 40,000 or 30,000 ventilators. You know, you go into major hospitals sometimes, they'll have 2 ventilators, and now all of a sudden they're saying, can we order 30,000 ventilators?
President Trump has suggested that maybe you don't need those tens of thousands of ventilators you have spoken about. Were you surprised to hear that, and what's your reaction?
Oh, look, I hope he's right. You know, I hope no one gets sick. I hope no one needs a ventilator. But I don't operate on what I hope or what I would like to see or what my expectation is. I operate on the data and on the numbers and on the science. And every projection I have from multiple sources, and these are worldwide health experts, say that we have to be prepared for an apex of 140,000 hospital beds and 40,000 ICU beds with ventilators. I hope they're wrong. I hope I don't need 40,000. I hope I don't need 30,000. I hope I don't need 5,000. I hope this whole facility, Lester, stays empty. And we built it for nothing.
But you don't believe that's going to be the case?
The numbers don't say that's going to be the case.
They don't have the proper protections. Wearing a soiled mask for days at a time is not adequate.
Tonight, our nation in crisis has now become the global leader in confirmed cases of the coronavirus. From New York to Los Angeles, the number of Americans infected surpassing every other country as our death toll climbs to grim new levels.
At the peak of this curve, we're now projecting that we may have as many as 10,000 new cases a day.
With a global disaster unfolding, Italy's death toll rose by nearly 1,000 in a single day, climbing to almost 10,000. The Pope presiding over a ghostly empty St. Peter's Square. Boris Johnson, the UK's Prime Minister, the first world leader to test positive.
Late today, the president signing the biggest economic rescue package in history, but not inviting the Speaker of the House, who earlier in the day spoke of a bipartisan alliance.
Now also an infant in Illinois, the youngest casualty yet.
Citing a survey that around 90% of their cities don't have enough masks, test kits, and other personal protective equipment.
After floating the idea of a multi-state quarantine at least 4 times today, President Trump did not offer specifics as he returned to the White House.
What legal authority you would use for a quarantine, sir?
The president's incoming chief of staff, Mark Meadows, weighed in.
Can you tell us about the legal authority for a quarantine?
Evaluating all the options right now.
Earlier today, the president said he has the power to restrict movement out of the New York, New Jersey area and would consult with governors.
Would that be a more enforceable kind of quarantine, sir?
This would be an enforceable quarantine. And, I'd rather not do it, but we may need it.
Federal law does give the Centers for Disease Control the ability to restrict movement state to state to prevent spread of illness. A federal power rarely used. The CDC says it was last enforced on a large scale during the Spanish flu pandemic 100 years ago.
Agony in Europe tonight as Italy's death toll passes 10,000. A day after another morbid milestone, 919 dead on Friday, the most in one day in any country. Global cases rising above 650,000, with more than 30,000 dead. Soldiers today disinfecting hospitals, train stations, and flying a drone to disinfect the streets. A national lockdown extended to April 11th.
So the question we're asking is, if you take hydroxychloroquine after an exposure, will that prevent you from getting infected?
He's looking for 1,500 patients to participate in the trial. In just days, hundreds signed up. But there are possible dangers. The Mayo Clinic issued a warning this week that doctors need to determine which patients are at risk of potentially fatal arrhythmia.
Late today, extending the federal guidelines for social distancing through April 30th. He said the death toll expected to peak in about 2 weeks, with hopes of a recovery, he said, by June.
Looking at what we're seeing now, I would say between 100 and 200,000 cases, deaths. I mean, we're going to have millions of cases, but...
Pastor Tony Spell refuses to cancel Sunday's service, attended by hundreds.
The church, again, is not a non-essential, okay? The church is the most essential thing in all the world.
Could a blood transfusion from a coronavirus survivor help others fight the disease?
And here in New York, the state's death toll rose above 1,000 today. The governor here now saying this is a war.
Meanwhile, President Trump suggested that authorities are asking for too many protective masks.
Something's going on, and you ought to look into it as reporters. Where are the masks going? Are they going out the back door?
Today, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo responded.
If he wants to make an accusation, then let him make an accusation. But I don't know what he's trying to say by inference.
The FDA just approved a coronavirus test that gives patients results in as fast as 5 to 15 minutes. How soon will this test be available?
Lester, this new test is going to be rolled out in Detroit this week to be used for frontline healthcare workers who are among the most vulnerable.